I'm Greg Cummings, the CEO of Power 100, and we are very lucky today because we are sitting down with Mike Hollander, the CEO of Weather Tite Windows, located in Tampa, Florida. Mike is the #1 rated leader for the home improvement industry in Florida and top ranked on our charts. So we're very excited to have him here. Mike, thanks for taking the time, brother.
I'm honored, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I want to jump right into it because your story is incredible. What you've been able to do, how you've been able to persevere, grow, and establish yourself in the greater Tampa Bay market. Not only that, take your company to a $50 million plus business in one market with one product. I haven't seen it anywhere in the entire country. You're the only person, if there is somebody else out there that has one, if there is somebody out there that has a one location office doing 50 million plus with one product, well, I guess two, windows and doors, if you count that as two. Give me a call because I want to talk to you. So Mike, thanks again for sitting down with us, brother.
Thanks for having me. I'm actually honored. Greg, 3 years ago, I think we met, right?
Yeah.
And it's just amazing what you've accomplished in those 3 years. I over a phone call 3 years ago, I met you, I knew the name, but, and now I'm watching you and I'm seeing you in all these publications or all these events, and wow, I mean, you are a testament to what hard work and dedication can accomplish in a short amount of time, focused, and I'm impressed and frankly honored to be here with you.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate it. You've inspired me before I even knew you to get into the business on what you were doing, on the principles, the ethics and the marketing mind that you have, which we're going to talk about here. But I want to kind of dive in first to the story that people maybe don't know about you, the earlier days, and in particular, the struggles. All great things start with a struggle because they can't be great. You can't enjoy them if they don't have a little bit of pain and hurt to them, right? So take me back to those early days, the first struggles that you had. Maybe you had that, bottom dollar feel or whatever it was, going out of business. I don't know what it was. Tell me about those early struggles and how they shape your mentality today.
Well, I became an owner of Weather Tite Windows in Tampa. I was about 28 years old. I want you to picture, I literally had braces on my teeth. It's a true story. I moved to Tampa. I didn't have, I had $7,000 to my name. I had to go find a warehouse. I had to find an apartment. I packed up a U-Haul from Youngstown, Ohio, packed up a U-Haul, drove to Tampa, and just started going. And frankly, when I was selling windows in Ohio, I was a good salesman, but owning a business, that's a whole different level, and I came to Tampa and didn't know how to generate leads. It's something you never think about, but no matter what,
as a salesman,
yeah. Because at least the company I came from,
yeah.
They were sitting back then a fax machine, but getting fax, each morning or each evening, and you show up to the appointment, you do well by it, but that's it. You sold it, you did it, you followed up, you didn't. Generating the lead is a whole different, animal. So I didn't have money for traditional media. I didn't have money for newspaper, which was big back then. We're talking 2006. Google was not significant back then. And so the only way back then to generate a lead that I had the resources to do was local home shows. And so again, but I didn't have displays. I barely had a sample. So I remember I rented, with the last of my money, I rented a home show booth at, I think it was at Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg,
right.
And set up a small booth, a 6-foot table. I didn't even have a tablecloth, Greg,
I can picture it. I wish I had a picture of this.
I wish I did too, actually. But, and I stood there myself and, people were walking in and talked to them, engaged them, and generated a couple appointments. Sunday at the end of the show, I packed everything up, put it back in my Jeep. And the next day, Monday, I started running these appointments. Like I said, I was a good salesman in Ohio. I frankly think I was great. But, I was a good salesman in Ohio. It took me 1 month to close my first deal in Tampa. Now, I want you to understand, and I learned this the hard way too. Every market you do business in is unique, and you have to look at it that way. But being a 28-year-old kid and, not really knowing, I took the same approach that I did in Ohio. Now, I didn't educate myself on the difference between the two markets. And I think that was an early struggle that I had. No money, no brand recognition. And then I didn't understand, Florida especially, we have very strictest building codes in the United States because of hurricanes. And codes were fairly new back then. I think they started in 2002, 2004. So, people in Tampa Bay barely had an understanding of it. So, I was having trouble, and what I realized was I couldn't educate a client. So being a home show appointment as well, they probably getting 3 or 4 estimates, and guys were showing up, and they just knew a lot more than I did. So I remember it was about a month later, and I called a friend from Ohio, and I said, I don't know, I think I made a mistake. Mike, you didn't make a mistake. Just stick with it. And I said, I miss home. It was a lot. Finally, I got my first client, and it was a tremendous feeling. I want to tell you something about building relationships too. I know it's a little off topic. That client, to this day, I could pick up the phone and call. They're actually, as I got a little bit bigger, I'll tell a quick story. Sorry, off topic, but I made a commercial and I asked their family to be in it. I did all the windows in their house, beautiful home in Palm Harbor, Florida, and they, put their kids in the commercial. A couple years ago, the doctor, he was a doctor, he called me. Needed some documentation for his insurance. And I asked him, how are the kids? Now, at that time, they were little kids, They're graduating college, they're entering the military,
Golly.
It's just crazy to think back. But listen, you got to be willing to fail before you succeed. And not willing, no one wants to, feel those failures. But you got to go through some of those struggles, as you said, to succeed. And look, the biggest thing, too, is you got to be smart with money. It's a topic that not many people want to talk about, but I see it happen all the time. Somebody starts selling, they mistake cash flow for profit. I've seen companies, there was one not that long ago that, started off with a bang, they came out of nowhere. And, all of a sudden I started hearing stories about the owners of this company, new boats, new cars, you name it, watches, all those things. And, sure enough, maybe a year after they had started having trouble with paying for their orders, paying for their bills. Next thing you know, God forbid, news reporters showing up on their doorsteps. And
I want to say that again, because I think that is so profound. And in the world that we live in right now, people think cash is the greatest thing. Private equity sees cash, investors see cash. It's all, you turn on social media, it's all about cash flow. Everything's cash flow. If you're cash flow rich, you got $1 billion business, right?
Yeah.
But what you said is so powerful, especially for a smaller company growing. Actually, even more important for a larger company.
Right about that.
You know what I mean? Is mistaking cash flow for profit. Cash flow is not your money.
Correct.
Cash flow is that customer's money. That cash flow is the promise.
Correct.
Right? The profit is on the backside.
When you install it, yep.
And it's per job.
Correct.
I look at profit per job. I don't look at profit on a weekly or monthly or whatever basis. It's, did we make money on that job? And you got to analytically break that down. If you didn't, why you didn't, where it missed. Was it installation? Was it a go back? Was it a product misorder? Was it did we have to spend 3 days on it because all the windows were 3 inches smaller or bigger? Manipulation of the opening. Oh my God, it's endless, right? But keep going. But that point, Mike, really, really is important for other people to hear. And I think that moment might just stop somebody to pause and do better business. And ultimately, that will help homeowners, across the country with that mindset.
You also said something brilliant, and it was something that I did when I was just myself. It's something I did when I became a small company, medium size, and to this day, a larger company. We've had a lot of phone calls, we've had a lot of Zoom meetings, but one day I never take a meeting or never talk is on a Tuesday. Now, I have lived my life by this since I started, and on Tuesday, I literally sit in my office and I go through each and every job that we installed, from Tuesday, or I should say that week, I go through every job. I do it by, they're grouped together in 2 ways. One by the sales team that help facilitate the sale, and the other one is by the installs. And so whether it's a brand new sale, I look at the jobs. And I look at the numbers on it. I look for more than just the numbers. I want to make sure agreements are written properly. I want to make sure change orders are in place. All these things. I am, how do I say it? I'm in the trenches. And that's what I consider every Tuesday. It's like, I feel like I'm a coach the rest of the week. Tuesday, I want to be a player. I want to get in that game. And I take a look at each and every job individually. And then if there's something wrong, maybe the job was undersold. Maybe there was some stucco work that needed to be done that wasn't accounted for. maybe we needed heavy equipment like a lift, or that wasn't accounted for. And then also on the flip side, when we're installing jobs, when the jobs are done and complete, I want to look at each job. I want to see, where those numbers fell. Now, I'm not sitting there saying greedy and how do I make more money. I'm saying I want to see where we failed. Again, failure is important in life. If you just come out and you're successful at everything, it's not realistic. And going back to what you said, that's the life all these people see on Instagram. That's the life they see on YouTube. But it's not, it's not real. And so I want to look at each and every job, and if there's an issue, whether it was with the sales team or whether it was with the installers. And one other thing that most people don't think about is when we go back and service a job, that file is put back on my desk. I want to see that as well. Why do we service it? How many times have we been out there? Look, if we go out to service a client, and it's for the same call, but you're going out there 2 or 3 times, you might not realize it, but you're losing money, So how do you stop the bleeding? Number one, losing money is bad enough. Number two, you're going to lose credibility with that client. And listen, as much as I love, advertising, as much as I love, that aspect of the business, the greatest, you're going to get the greatest lead is going to be that referral. So you got to take care of those clients. And if you're going to their home 3 or 4 times to service the same issue, not only are you losing money, but you're losing more in referrals. So you need to stop the bleeding, immediately. So again, every Tuesday, everyone, Greg, I got married on a Saturday. Sunday, my wife and I hung out, opened cards, Monday, okay, I took the day off. Tuesday, I was right back in that office,
How many years have you been doing that?
So I probably started doing it really, I'd say since about 2007 or 8. And it's funny the way I used to do it is I used to take the files, and I'm
You're like a 3rd grade teacher with your red pen, all right, flipping them through.
But I take the file on the back page. I made what I felt was the most important aspects to look for in a job, and some of it's sold, some of it's the expenses that went to that job. So again, when I was first starting, I didn't even have QuickBooks. I couldn't, I didn't want to waste the money. It wouldn't be a waste, but I didn't want to invest the money in software because to me, every penny has to go back into lead generation.
Love it.
Lead generation. So I would do this, the old analog way. I'd write out every expense. Every time we had a bill, it was billable to the job. I wrote it on there. If a customer called about a complaint, it was written on that file. Listen, as much as I think technology is great, as much as I use my calendar on my phone and my computer, I still believe that you need to physically handwrite something. I took my pen out, but you'd be hard pressed to ever catch me without a pen, because I think, and I carry a notebook around with me everywhere. I think just the old analog way of writing things down, an old to-do list, if you will, and then you go through that and check it off, I think is more powerful than using, let's say, a calendar that's on your phone or computer.
Well, what I'm hearing from you is your commitment to what your end goal always is, right? And people will label you a marketing genius for the cookie, for everything that you do with that and how you've grown this business. People will say you're an excellent, you guys deliver an excellent product, as far as your installation, your quality. You've been there for years. You're going to be there to service, warranty, whatever it is for the customers. Your reputation's phenomenal. But really what you do, what I'm hearing, is you care more about your brand than anything else. Mm-hmm. And that's why you're so meticulous at each step of the way to make sure that your training, which you have an excellent onboarding program, it goes all the way through your company, all the way to the customer, and then it circles back with a referral or repeat business if they move or whatever the case may be, right?
Yep.
I want to move to the branding element though. I want to talk about the cookie, and because, and I do have one here. I had to do it.
You knew the way to my heart,
Because you told me on one of your ads to bring you a cookie. So now the element about this cookie, and I don't know if you knew what you were doing at the time, and I'm curious how it became about, but this trigger, when people see a cookie, they associate, boom, with Windows.
Yep.
Right?
Sorry, I can't help myself.
Go ahead. There it is.
Thank you, buddy. Delicious. Go ahead.
And you're welcome. Now I need some windows, please. Actually, we might need some windows because of the hurricane took our house out. But
I know a guy.
Yeah, I think so. But no, this cookie and triggers, I'm big on psychology. I'm big on triggers, on reasons, on associations, right? And so, I told you this story when I first met you that when I chose to go into the window business, my grandmother looked at me and goes, "Why would you do that? The Cookie Man's got all the business." And it's because your ads are everywhere. And if you don't live in the greater Tampa Bay area, you have no idea what I'm talking about, but you got to imagine that this guy's been on every TV, every magazine, every billboard that you can imagine with this cookie. And what's the tagline? Bring me a cookie. Right?
Don't forget the cookies.
Yeah, don't forget the cookies. And that has stuck. So every time somebody's baking cookies at their home in their kitchen, that smell, that process, they look at their windows and they see it. So it's only a matter of time before they Google Cookie Man Windows. And it takes them straight to you all. It's a genius. Tell me, man, was it planned? How did it come about?
I can't give you the secret recipe to my cookies, but you like that.
I see what you did.
But listen, again, starting out, I want to tell you a great story. So I was at one of those home shows, and I did a couple commercials on a small station.
Yeah.
I think it was a very local station, and funny story is. I was at one of the home shows, and a representative at the time was Bright House Cable at the time in Tampa. Lori Castleman, I love Lori to this day. I probably wouldn't be where I am without Lori, and my other advertising partners, but Lori was one of the first. And I was at the home show, no idea, again, there by myself, and a girl taps me on the shoulder, a lady taps me on the shoulder, and she says, "Are you?" And I always had the Weather Tite Mike thing, Again, it's branding, not just to call myself Mike or Michael Hollander, it was always Weather Tite Mike. Now, a lot of that, I grew up in northeastern Ohio. We're here at Dave Yoho, and you see all these Ohio guys, right? So I had the fortunate circumstances of growing up around a lot of these old school guys, as I like to say. And, I would try to go wherever they were. If they were back, I want you to picture, late 90s, early 2000s. They would all be at local diners, all the owners, and they'd be in nice suits, and they'd all go meet there for coffee, smoke-filled rooms, they'd all sit around and smoke, and they'd trade their war stories. Now I was just a kid back then, and I would go. I knew where they would hang out, whether it was in Cleveland or in Youngstown or even Pittsburgh. I go to these places, and they let me in the group. They let me sit and listen, and they'd haze me a little bit, but they just thought I was some young schmuck, excuse the term, but but I learned so much from them. And, some of them were characters on TV, and I grew up watching them, and seeing them. And so when I came to Tampa, not knowing, the area, understanding the market, I tried different things that, I saw in Ohio, made a couple spoof commercials about some big time attorneys, around. There was 2.5 Men back in the day. I made 2.5 Mike, go on YouTube. It was a great commercial. Different things, but nothing was, outside of being Weather Tite Mike, nothing was creating a brand, Mm-hmm. And then we were on camera one day, and don't forget the cookies, and it's just because cookies were on set, and the producers and but Mike, cookies, what's that have to do with windows? I said, don't worry, I want to go with it. I like the way it sounded, and we just almost every commercial I would have cookies there, and I'd bring that up. Now, I liken this to what's called unaided awareness. Are you familiar with this term?
Yeah.
If you go up to somebody in Tampa Bay and you ask them, Tampa, even Sarasota, and you say, hey, if you needed windows, who would you call? Now, for the longest time, the results of unaided awareness would say that most people would call the box stores, Home Depot, Lowe's,
right.
They would always rank first. And then whoever, a few steps away would be another window or door company. And I thought to myself, how do I get there? Well, it's not just about advertising. It's not just about marketing. It's about branding, creating a brand. And this again goes to investing money as opposed to spending it. So when you're building a brand, it takes time. So you're not going to see that immediate return on that investment, and you have to be willing to accept that. When you advertise, and back then, advertising was bigger in newspapers than it is on TV. We didn't have Google. We had it, but it wasn't as strong. And Facebook, you were only advertising on Facebook back then if you were selling ice cream. It wasn't for windows and doors. So, I wanted to be that unaided awareness. I wanted to be number one. So I stuck with something that I thought nobody else was doing, and it was the cookie. And I tell you, I had calls from everybody, Mike, what are you doing? Cookies, they have nothing to do with windows. but I paid it no mind.
But you're getting the calls.
Exactly right.
That's proof of concept right there, right?
They knew it. And one of the crowning achievements I had was, it was a pat on my back. I was at a dinner, again, going back to, I didn't finish my story about Lori. Let me tell you, Lori. So, again, spending money, any fool can do. So I met Lori. She said, "You're Weather Tite Mike." I said, "Yeah." She said, you look a lot fatter on TV. Now, I've gained weight now, but
hey, we're successful. These are all my cookies. Right?
The camera was at 20 pounds. And I wanted to go, and she was with Spectrum Cable, and, she was trying to convince me to advertise on cable. And I said, I really don't have the money. And I said, and she said, well, where do you do business? I said, well, Tampa. What part of Tampa, And so when I started dealing with her, I wanted to be everywhere. Now, again, you have to be willing to invest. She said, with cable, you can zone your marketing. You can pick that zone. And I wanted to be in all these zones. And she said, Mike, you don't have the money for that. And she said, no one's going to know who you are. So we zoned it in just small sections of Tampa. And we stayed in those sections. Now, you want to know how it works, because and back then I ran a lot of my own appointments, but when you ran those appointments in those areas and people recognized you, and it gave them the perception that we were a much larger company than we were. Now, we weren't. The owner of the company is out there running the appointments, But when people recognized me and, I wish I had a cookie for it, then you knew it was working. So after a while, Lori would not let me expand my reach. She was a great rep, because instead of saying, sure, just spend more money, she wouldn't take more money. Even if I had it, she wouldn't. And she said, no, we're going to keep you in this zone. And it was, and I think it was almost a year or so, and again, it was just in this zone. Now, I was going outside that zone for business, but where the cable got me those appointments was inside of that zone. And we stuck with it. Now, I got invited to a dinner with the Spectrum now, but back then it was Bright House. And there was the owner of one of the largest Ford dealerships in the United States. And he's there, and he happened to live in that zone I did business in. And he says, and we were at the dinner, and he says, Weather Tite Mike. And I said, yeah. He says, yeah, I thought that was you. I actually called my wife and told her I'm at dinner with the cookie man. He says, look, Mike, and he was really, to the point kind of guy. He says, Mike, I got to tell you, I never knew what the hell a window was until you came to town. Now, again, here I was just advertising in one zone, but even in his mind, because he saw me on TV every morning and every day, we were this huge guy. I didn't want to tell him, I got 6 people at the office, that's it, me and 5 others. But, again, branding is something you have to be willing to invest in, and you have to understand it's like buying a stock. It takes time, to mature. And you got to give it time, and then if it's not working, you got to revisit. Just like investing in stocks, you invest in a stock, you don't do it for short-term gains. You're hoping for the longer-term gains. So it's the same thing. You got to look at, and I think it's so important, especially now. We have Google, we have Facebook, and it allows Instagram, and it allows companies to seem bigger than they are. But going back to, I call it a home show mentality. It puts 100 companies under the same roof, under the same, and it doesn't distinguish anybody from anything. So, branding is what will distinguish you from somebody else, So talk about unaided awareness. Well, I want to be, one of the 3, if people get 3 estimates, I want to always be in Tampa and Sarasota, one of those 3 calls. And listen, when it's time and somebody says I need windows, I want them to call us. And this, my friend, it worked better than I could ever imagine. Now I'm having a love affair with cookies, but I'll never go vegan. I promise you that.
Yeah, you don't want all the vegan cookies. Looking at it, and it's almost impossible for somebody to catch it, right? Because of what you talked about and the branding element and what that rep did for you to where you saturated that market to where they genuinely knew you. Yep. The difference that I see in today's market, and this is all we do, is look at home improvement companies all across the country every single day, every single month, every single year. And the difference of what you guys do is your brand it's the cookie, but it's also you.
Correct.
Because they feel like they know and trust the owner, the CEO, the leader of that organization, the buying confidence is so much higher, right? So it's not just them branding, but it's them willing and able and eager to, like what you said, when they need something, they're going to call you because they feel like they know you a little bit.
Well, that with With becoming the face, it comes with great responsibility, and that's another thing you have to be willing to accept. I am in all the commercials. I'm in every advertisement, and it's not arrogance. It's a sense of responsibility. I want people to know that this is my company. And at the end of the day, I am responsible for their customer experience. Everything down to if one of my trucks cuts somebody off, they want to call and talk to Mike. And I want to be accountable for that. I tell my guys, I go to a local Starbucks every morning, and I tell my whole team, I say, when I go in that Starbucks, I love when people say, hey, you're the cookie man, or hey, that's not a cookie, or they buy me cookies, take pictures with me. What I don't want is someone coming up to me and saying, your salesman was a shyster, or your installers were hacks, or I called your office and they were rude. I tell them that to me is just the worst thing you could do to me, and to the company and to the brand. Look, when you become that brand, when you become the face of the company, then you have a sense of responsibility to that community. You really do. And as much as I would love to say we're perfect in what we do, we still make mistakes. But when we do that, it's the accountability. If they know I'm accountable, they know I'm in that office every day, they come to see me. If something goes wrong, people will show up there at the office. No cookies for you, Mike, but and I'm accountable for that. So that makes me want to work harder. That makes me want to keep an eye on things even more. Because again, it's my name, it's my family's name, and we don't. I don't want that bad reputation. I want that good reputation. I want people to feel confident referring us out. Or if you said to somebody, I need windows, I'm rebuilding I call the cookie man. That's important to me, that they have that confidence to refer my name. Even if they never did business with me, refer me to you, because they never heard anything bad about us,
right.
Or very little, hopefully.
Well, you got to have a little bit of the bad. You got to have a little bit, because you're hiring new people, you're training new people, you have this whole process in place. And I wanted it's a perfect segue to where I wanted to take this next segment here is, you, because you're involved, you're not overly involved, but you're involved in the right places, right? To make sure that everything's going in line. Your involvement today is just as much as focused as it was when you were running appointments. It's just in a little bit different capacity to ensure that overall customer experience, because you want to make sure every customer is taken care of. That's what you do. My question, you have the motivation from those early years. You learned how to educate the customers by brimstone and fire, right? On the coals in those early days. You learned that what it takes to how urgent you have to sell when you have $1,000 in your pocket, right? And you got $10,000 in bills coming that month. So that's an urgency to sell, a passion to run your business. The importance of installing the right way, not just so the customer is happy, but so we don't have to go back. Mm-hmm. It's a win-win. Both sides have to win every time for it to be great business, right? Question, Mike, how do you possibly take those hard-earned, ironclad lessons, or experiences that you've taken, and how do you embed that into the culture now at a $50 million business and what you're going to be this year? You're going to grow this year. It's going to be probably the best year you guys have ever had because you have a brand. And, at the end of the day, how do you coach that?
Well, you make a great point. As we get bigger, it's a little harder. But listen, I'm involved. That's what you have to be when you're at that company. You lead by example and mentor your people. And I think if you picked up the phone and called anyone that has worked with me for a while, they'll tell you that I'll answer the phone when they call. I'll answer. I used to, when I would recruit people to come work for me, I would tell them this isn't going to just be a job. It's an internship into entrepreneurship. I want you to learn how to run a business. I want you to run this as if it is your own business. Because listen, if you're in sales, especially in the sales end, you are your own business. Your goal is, and I tell my guys this, I want you to understand one of my philosophies on sales. Year one, when I hire you, you're going to depend probably 100% on my leads. I'm going to generate the appointments for you. You're going to depend on that. If you're doing things and you follow my methodology, by year two, it should be 80% my lead, 20% yours. You're going to get referrals. You're going to get self-generated leads. But the important thing to remember is those have a higher closing percentage, right? If I give you a lead, when I send it to you that morning or that night, you have a 50% chance of closing it. If in that next year, when you have a self-gen or a referral or a previous customer, 80-20. You know, that's why I came up with the 20-80 split. Now by year 3, that should maybe go 75-25. Year 4, 60-40. By year 5, it should be about 50-50. I have guys that have been with me 13 years on the sales side, 12 years, 11 years, 10 years. Some days, some weeks go by. I don't have to give them any appointments. You know, they are booked solid with referrals and self-gens and things of that nature. So when you have a methodology, when you have a philosophy, you have to talk to your people. They have to understand what their goal is. You know, my goal is to grow. My goal is to become bigger, to become, the best window and door company in Tampa Bay and then Florida, and then frankly, all the United States at some point. So when you're hiring, especially on the sales side, you have to teach them, what is their goal, and their goal is, number one, I want to teach you how to, you got to learn how to read a P&L. You got to see that balance sheet that goes along with it, because reading the P&L will tell you one thing, but where are those expenses coming from? They got to understand that. They got to understand the customer satisfaction of the things. That it's no longer, look, back when I was selling windows in Ohio, before social media, before everything like that, it was about close the deal, close it today, always be closing, always be selling. And great philosophy to have and great mindset to have. But at the end of the day, what has changed is, you want to sell, help a client buy something today. I'm using the word sell. You have to help a client buy something today so that they're satisfied tomorrow and they get you those referrals down the road. Because again, higher closing percentage of those referrals, more satisfied customers based on those referrals. So when I hire somebody, I want to explain to them, this is my goals. I want to grow. We were 50 million, 2 years ago. We'll be bigger, this year. But your goal, Greg, as someone who's starting at Weather Tite, I want to help you set your goals so that if you're here year 2, year 3. Now, if you go through the roster at Weather Tite Windows, the sales team, most of them have been there, I would say at least 6+ years, a lot of them 10+ years.
Wow.
When you go to my install side, it's the same thing. What are their goals? What are they? Well, installers, it's a little harder. So you got to reward them too. Those job signs we put in the yards, well, if somebody calls and they call from that job sign, if it's in that same area, I try to send the same install crew back to that area. Number one, we're in Florida. So a lot of these are HOAs, a lot of the homes are built the same. So if I know that installer did a good job there and we get a referral from that, my installer gets a little bit of bonus, but he also goes back to the next job that's in that, and he's familiar.
Now, he can do better, faster.
Correct. Yes. It's again, my philosophy on, now, I have a great window manufacturer. I just want to say that. If anyone's familiar with Mitard out of Pennsylvania, Mitard owns PGT, which is in Sarasota. And they are just phenomenal to work with. Great, great company. I couldn't be happier with them. They're so supportive of their dealers. Just want to give them a shout out on that. But one of the things is I only sell PGT windows and doors. So we go in every house when we know we're going to sell PGT windows. The salesmen know the product. They know, everything there, not everything, but as much as there is to know about it. And my installers, they're installing that same product day in and day out. Now look, I don't see anything wrong with the window guys that are selling kitchens and bathrooms. I don't see anything wrong with the window guys that are selling flood protection now, but they're not specializing in that stuff, So you got an installer, one day's installing windows, next day's installing, a bathroom. I don't agree with that. That's just my opinion. So my guys are installing those same PGT windows every day. So they understand, what they have to do to get that in properly. So again, reward the installers as well. They go back to that area, they get paid a little bit of bonus for getting the referral, they go back, and just like selling becomes, I hate to say easier, but better for us because we're so familiar with the brand, it becomes, if they keep going back to that same HOA, that same development, the installation becomes easier for them, as you said, quicker.
Well, it's confidence.
Yeah.
It's confidence that you're the best company for every homeowner because the outcome's more predictable.
Yeah.
And so keeping it simple, what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing that you're doing is the sales reps that go into the home, they can confidently look that homeowner in the eye and go, we are going to take care of you because I've seen this thousands of times.
Yep.
We have not strayed from our window. Although you probably researched windows all the time on what the best window to do, but nobody can beat PGT. Okay. So when you're installing the same product over and over again, now you have a decade of experience with them that you can look at a homeowner and say, this window hasn't failed in 10 years. We have been happy year in and year out. with the production, the quality, the delivery, the quality, every single element of PGT, right? And so that's really where the confidence and their ability to passionately say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, you know, this is the best option for you. And when that genuine look is in their eye, selling does become easier.
Yes.
It's when other companies, I see these slumps or these issues come up, is when they're selling multiple windows or they're selling multiple products, like you said. And then all of a sudden you get more hiccups on the install side, a couple extra go backs, maybe misorders because it's a new product. You know, some window manufacturers, you measure them differently, right?
1,000%.
So all of a sudden a window comes in an inch bigger than the opening. In Florida, we have a problem because it's all block.
All block open.
Up north, maybe we can do a little stretching of wood, you know? We have a wood stretcher. I'm selling wood stretchers if anybody needs a wood stretcher. It's a joke for people. But yeah, no, at the end of the day, that confidence in your process and your delivery is what really sets you apart and why you're the best ranked company, you know, in Florida.
And I agree with the best rank. But the other big thing is look, we talk a lot about sales, we talk a lot about installs. The people in that office, you know, I'm also blessed that, you know, 10, 15 years ago, hired the right people. The people who believed in the same thing I did. You know, I tell everyone in the beginning, I'm not going to sell roofs. I'm not going to sell bathrooms. You know, I'm not going to do flooring, windows and doors. Now, look, when I was small and I didn't know what I was doing, and trust me, I sold some siding, you know, switched around from manufacturers.
You had to learn that you wanted to just sell windows,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. It was like your beard, you know, when you didn't always have a beard, right? But,
I didn't, but once I realized I had it, man, I'm not letting it go.
This might be one of the best well-manicured beards I've ever seen, folks. No, sorry, I have jokes. But, you know, the people within the office, this is where the real blessing is. Because you know, selling that one brand, it helps with retention as well. You know, we talk about the sales process becomes easier, and we talk about the installation process becomes easier. But now these people within my office, and especially ones that have been there for a while, they know that product, it's the same thing, you know. So they know how to get it installed. They know how to get it permitted. They know how to answer customers' questions, you know, and they're confident in it as well, you know. And I've been blessed that, you know, again, it's not look, when you run a company, you can't be a dictator. I've seen it 100 times, and especially in our industry. I don't know what
or a spectator, where you move too far back and you're just yelling from the crowd, pass the ball to 14, you know.
I go on these, you know, PGT has a trip every year, and I go, and I talk to these other dealers, and you know, one guy's saying, yeah, you know, I went here on vacation, and I took my boat here, and then flew here, and I'm thinking, when do you run your boat? When are you at your company? Well, you know, we're doing fine. You think you're doing fine, but you could always be doing better. Yeah. You know, and they're just never there, and they wonder why they're not growing, why they're not, you know, and they're coming to me and they say, well, Mike, what can I do different? And I say, go to work. You know, no, I hate that. The spectator, I mean, I don't hate it, but it's better for my business.
It's way better, yeah.
But the dictatorship, I've seen it all too often, you know, and listen, you got to be willing. It's tough sometimes. I get angry, you know, things happen. You know, clients listen, we deal with the general public, and the general public each has a different idea of what the right way to install it is, or what the right way to be customer service, or what have you. So going back to the original question, when you get, and I want to shout out to my people in the office, they're just unbelievable. You know, I don't take too many vacations. I don't take too many trips. Anyone will tell you that. And I left to be here this week, you know, at this Yoho Summit, and I was confident, you know, and I was confident in leaving the people there that things would get taken care of, that everything would get handled. And one other thing I want to talk about, as an owner, as a CEO, you have to know, I'm very involved in the company, but I also know my strength. And my strength is on that lead generation and the sales end. Now, could I install a window myself? You know, I understand how to do it, you know.
YouTube.
Yeah, and I am the license holder for the company, you know, but I know that is not my strong suit.
Right.
So I have two wonderful general managers, and they understand. I like to think everything there is about codes and installing the windows and servicing, and then they have their team underneath them. You know, our service manager is fantastic. You know, permitting is fantastic. Great coordinators in the office. Great measure technicians, been with me for a long time. Which again, I don't think we put enough emphasis on how important measuring accurately is.
Don't.
Yeah. And, so I'm blessed. These people make me look good. And I'm not just saying that because I think they'll see this interview. I'm saying that because I really,
well, you genuinely know that because people come up to you, they recognize you. It's, if they had a bad experience, that would be the first thing that somebody said.
Absolutely.
First thing somebody said. And it doesn't happen, right? And so what you've done, I just want to bring this whole full circle, if it's all right.
Please.
I asked you the question, how do you instill the grit and the passion and the commitment in the team? And what it sounds like is, one, you hire great people. You put them in the position to succeed. You get out of their way or you help them, right? And the most important thing is you're there.
Show them you're there.
Right? Yes. And I saw a commercial and on Facebook or something. It was like a post or something. And, it was a little kid. And actually it wasn't even that, he was probably a teenager. And he was getting up to bat. And all of a sudden his dad comes running out of the car and shows up on the fence. And the kid looks at him. I'm like tearing up just like saying this. And the kid looks over at him and sees his dad's there. And all of a sudden, the point of that was like, it didn't really matter if he hit the ball. But the fact that his dad showed up meant everything to him, right, in that little moment. And at the end of the day, he does hit the ball, and then that moment is shared. But it didn't necessarily have to happen that way. And the fact that you're there with all of your people all the time just empowers them, that the confidence to do their job the right way, the best way possible, is so empowering.
Now look, whatever happened to lead by example, and that's what I think is important. So they have to know I'm there. They have to know, listen, that phone rings nonstop, and they have to know I'm going to answer that phone. I want to tell you a story, and it's a true story. Now, as I get bigger and bigger and bigger, it's hard to answer every call. But, and again, learn this from me. So a couple months ago, this is at the end of last year, I have a rep. One of my reps has been with me a long time, and it was a Saturday. Now, listen, I have 2 young kids now. My life has changed a little bit too. And it was on a Saturday, and I think I was out in the pool with the kids, and he tried calling me, and I didn't answer the phone. So later on, about a couple hours later, I see the call. I call him back. He says, "Don't worry, I took care of it." Next Saturday, the same thing happened. He came to the office, and he says, "Mike, is everything okay?" And I says, "Yeah, why?" He says, "Well, I called you 2 Saturdays in a row. You haven't picked up the phone." And I said, "I'm sorry, buddy." And he's like, "Oh, I'm worried. And I said, "Why are you worried?" And he says, in the 13 years I've worked for you, there has never been a time when you haven't been able to answer the phone, let alone twice. And now it was a really honest mistake. But this is how used to, because I want to be, and again, I say it, in the trenches with the guys. And they're just used to their general being there. And when I wasn't there, it wasn't well, he's blowing me off. He's on it. It was if you would have saw the look of concern on his face, and I had to reinstill in him that everything's fine. I'm sorry, it's not something I normally do, but I was just out, out playing with my daughter in the pool, and and he was fine with it. But again, it's about being involved, leading by example, and and being there. Now, as the company gets bigger and open more locations, you can't be there for all of it, but the goal is to have these guys that I taught and trained, to try and go and mimic the same thing, that they saw me doing. It's lead by example. It's something my father taught me. He's a very hard worker, man. Never took time off, and I tried. Just not that I have to, but I try to do the same thing that I saw him do. Yeah. And I think that's, especially in the beginning, you've got to be willing to sacrifice your time.
Look, we all have inspiration, and I think one of the most powerful things that you do is you look at every day as a beginning, right? Correct. And there's no end, there's no win. There's just a good day, and then let's beat it tomorrow.
Right.
You've inspired me, like I opened this up with. You've inspired several people, and I hope your story. I hope us telling your story here a little bit more in depth inspires others across the country to do business the right way, make a little bit better decisions, get back in the office, actually get into the files. Don't think that you're, because you're doing 12 million, that you can take a back seat and just trust everything's going to just continue to grow like it did when you were, in the trenches. I admire everything that you do, especially all your work and the deliverables that you do, the homeowners all across Florida. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time, Mike.
It was my honor.
And I really do appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
If you guys liked this content, definitely visit our website, power100.io, to view more interviews with some of the best leaders all across the country. We're very excited to share that. And our mission is to revolutionize the home improvement industry by giving you the best content, most importantly, the right content to empower you to grow your business and lead your people the right way. So until next time, as always, power up.
And don't forget the cookies.
I love it.
I had to slip it in there.
I love it, man. Hey, that was awesome.